drove 13 hours from Oregon to come here tonight in her black dress. And she has to drive back all by herself. Or maybe with that butcher. So Susan has been with Helicon West since the very inception of Helicon West. Back in fall 2005, I believe, when we were doing Writers Read Weekly at Utah State University and the University Inn. And she came along with us when we moved it down to Citrus and Sage, where Chad Van Zanten joined us when he was looking for a place for his writing. Stand up, Chad, you community man, you. Once again, it's because of Chad and because of Tim Keller. Stand up. There he's way in the back. That this book came around because they proposed it and I said, I don't have time, and we did it anyway, and it's pretty miraculous. Thank you, Chad and Tim, very, very much. And I want, yeah. And I want Mallory to come up here. Maria can't because she's, as I said, in New York, but Mallory, will you come up? Mallory has contributed a few art pieces. The Helicon West broadsides have her art on a couple of them. That one and this one. And Danielle Green is one of our Helicon West broadsides creators. So we ask people who read as a featured reader or at the open mic if they will please contribute a piece of writing, and sometimes they'll get published on a broadside. And we have a lot of different things happening at Helicon West. We have a blog. Go to the Helicon West blog. I don't know the address. You can go to the USU Writing Center at writing.usu.edu and go to Helicon West and see the blog. Abby Newhouse is doing the blog now. We've had some great blog writers on the Helicon West blog, and you should look at them. They're really fun pieces of writing. But I want to present Mallory with this check for this painting, The Carrier, because I know that every one of you who's pulled this book up on Amazon has said, what was one of those phrases that you used in your poem that meant like holy shit or something? Yeah, like that. So thank you, Mallory. And here is Michael McLean from Utah Humanities. And I also want to say that we had some great book blurb writers. David Pace, will you stand up? He's on the back of the book. By the way, someone needed a beer opener. David brought one. So go back there and he can pop your cap. Thank you to the reader. Thank you, Rob. Here's Michael and our panelists.
Run this safely over the table here. No, might not be able to. Maybe. Okay, I'm coming down to this side. Okay. Save us a few feet here.
All right. So working on everybody here okay? Okay. As Star said, I'm Michael McLean. I'm with Utah Humanities. Just a quick plug before I get going here. Since you guys are here tonight, I assume you're interested in literature and literary events. Next week, we are starting up the Utah Humanities Book Festival, which is about 120 events in 16 different towns in Utah. There's a lot going on. I know Star has some programs. I don't know if she has them here tonight, but that's okay. You know what? Actually, I've got some in my car. I can get them later. So there's a lot going on over the next 6 weeks. We get started next week with Lydia Yuknovich down in Salt Lake, but there's a lot happening up in Logan. There's a lot happening in Ogden, Brigham City, so plenty nearby here. So, and we're really here to talk about community, particularly literary community, And I think Susan driving 13 hours is a perfect illustration of how strong the community is up here. And the fact that there are so many people, how many people were here from the very start? Can you raise your hands again? Coming out for 10 years. Okay, how many people are here for the first time? Nice, thank you. And how many of those first timers, this is the first time you've ever been to a reading or anything like this? You're in a safe space, you can raise your hands. All right, good. Well, thank you, Star, and everybody else for creating this kind of space. The fact that people have been coming out consistently for 10 years and driving 13 hours, and plenty of other people in the room have driven distances to be here, that speaks to the strength of this community. And it's been my pleasure to be involved with this from very early on as well. So thank you, everybody, for making this possible. And on that note, I think the first question I have for everybody on the panel is how you got involved in Helicon West, what kind of experience you had, and what your impression is of this series. So, who would like to start?
You know, it's funny, I came to know both Star and Susan because we were all at the Writers at Work conference together. And I was lucky enough to be roommates with Susan. We had never met before. But just instantly, they reached out and were warm and welcoming, and we've been friends ever since. And when I had a book come out, they said, you need to come up to Logan. And I said, absolutely, I'll come up to Logan. And I got introduced to the Helicon West reading, and I've been jealous of it ever since.
I was first introduced to Helicon West as an undergrad at Utah State, and it was when it had just switched over to Citrus and Sage, and it was in this little cramped attic almost. And I remember going there as this scared little undergrad and listening to all the master's students read from their thesis and being so impressed and so wanting to be them. And so I went into debt and became one of them, and it was a great life choice. But no, it's huge. I think Helicon West has been a part of so many people's lives. It's helped them grow and develop in so many ways. I'm going to tell this story really quick to embarrass Star. The first time I told her, I don't think she remembers it, but I love it. We did one of the first really kind of bigger things we got to do with Helicon West was we did a reading on Utah Public Radio. And me and a couple of other students got to be a part of that. And I had never really given a real reading before. And so we did a rehearsal the night before at somebody's house. And when as rehearsals go, and the next day on campus, Star grabs me and she says very, very kindly, you need to come in my office and practice. And that was kind of my first introduction to there's the difference between a good and a bad reading. And so that laid the groundwork for kind of everything else. But yeah, Helicon West has been very important.
I would have to say that I had no choice. I heard there was this reading night going on. I thought, this is it. I bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and never let go until I had to leave town, actually. You had to drag me out of here. So I think this is really just one of the best things ever to have happened here in Logan. That not just campus, but that it's outside of campus and it brings the whole community together. So it's just a natural outcome of people wanting to get together and do something like this.
I'm going to tell a story that might not be true because I don't honestly remember how it happened, but I think it was Nano Taggart and Natalie Young who had lived up in Logan, gone to school at Utah State, and then had moved down to Salt Lake City, and were hanging out in the same coffee shop as me. It was Sugar House Coffee. It was next to the Blue Boutique before they gentrified that neighborhood and turned everything into something else. I met them, and they had an interest in writing, and they knew that I did too. When they decided to up and start a literary journal themselves, Sugar House Review, they asked for some poems, I gave them some, and then they did a reading at the City Arts Reading Series in Salt Lake City, who was in the library. And I think that's maybe why I met Star, because I think she was in that first issue too. And we got to talk, and she said, we have a reading series up there in Logan if you ever want to take a little journey. I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. I may have been walking up to her, though, and saying, hey, you should let me come to the reading series. I honestly don't remember exactly, but I'm going to blame it on Nano and Natalie as the Logan-Salt Lake connection, and just say that, you know, it's not just each and every one has their own thing in their own town. I think that it's sort of, there's crossover. Star will come down, and other people from Logan to Salt Lake City, and vice versa, all come up here. I've been down to Southern Utah University now because that's where Nano and Natalie moved. Not Dixie. I'm not sold on it after dinner tonight. I think that, again, I can't say for certain, but it sounds okay, so I'm going to believe that that's how it happened.
Yeah, you want to talk about community, Nano and Natalie are the masters of creating that. For those of you who don't know who they are, they were the founding editors for Sugar House Review, which is the journal Rob was talking about. So, and they have just kind of spread the love all over the state at this point, so, and continue to do so. Kind of a two-part question here. I'm curious if, Darren, it sounds like you're from here, or at least did your undergrad work here. So this series was kind of really important for you. But for the other three panelists in particular, I'm wondering if there was something similar to this when you were kind of coming of age as a writer, growing up someplace else, that influenced you the same way that, say, Darren has had this experience with Helicon West. And then I'd also like your impressions on what that does for a community, like why that's important, why it affects you or other writers the way it does, and why we need that kind of that fostering environment.
Me again, okay. I've lived in a lot of places. I grew up in Washington State. I went to school 1 year in California at Occidental College. I saw, when people used to use thumbtacks and bulletin boards, I saw a note. It was about Robinson Jeffers' poems being recited by Gary Snyder. For people who are not English majors, they're humongously big, all right? I didn't know anything, and I'd taken AP English and thought I was smart. But I went out of curiosity, and I just thought, this is pretty amazing. And so each place afterwards, I found myself, if I heard about it, if I saw a little note, I would go. And then as I started writing myself too, sometimes you'd be invited. Or you could foist yourself on people because they called it open mic, and mostly they meant musicians, but if you could sneak your way in there pretending that you could sing, and then you tell people poems and it's too late, So now I was in Tacoma at the Antique Sandwich Company. I went to school for my MFA in Spokane. After that I lived in Louisiana, and it seems like everywhere you go, either there is something or there's a vacuum, and there's somebody who's willing to fill that vacuum right away because they think, crap, we need this, and I'll organize it if that's what it takes. There was a guy in Lafayette, Louisiana named Mark Freed, and he had access to a little museum, and there was a photo exhibit of a famous photographer, and then just a bunch of lunkheads like me, right? So we're surrounded by actual album cover photography of Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, people like that. And it was really nice. People had a night out that they weren't at, the movies. We'd already seen Jurassic Park anyway, what else is next? And there need to be these kinds of things, and I think musicians get them all the time. Or they'll show up and they'll just plug in or play acoustic and a crowd will gather. Writers, I think we have to try a little bit harder, a little bit, to get people to come. Thank you all for coming. But without that, I don't know, books can be just sort of an individual, sort of lonely thing, which is why a lot of people read the same one and sit on a couch or go to Barnes & Noble to talk about it together. Always we used to have a fire, and always we used to have, stories told around it. And as far as we are removed from that, I think this is kind of an archetypal union gig, and we don't all have to be singers and songwriters to do this, so.
All right, I have a two-part answer, which might not be an answer to the original question because I don't really remember what the question was. All right.
Yeah,
So-
Rob just went on and on.
Okay, so here's the first part of what I want to say. whether it has to do anything with anything. So I grew up in a culture where poets, what we call poets, writers, novelists, playwrights, they were dead. You couldn't have been called any of these unless you were safely dead. All right, so if a live person walked down the street and said, oh, there's the writer, the poet, you said, really? Nah. All right, so not just that, but some people, you know, in their ivory towers moved away from us gentlefolk. And so after many years of meandering in this and just getting diffused in this thought, and whatever I wrote I thought absolute crap it was, which it was, of course, I ended up here in Logan, and there was Star and Brock and Shannon and Anne and I'm forgetting names, I'm sorry. So in any case, so they had a poetry group, and I don't know why, but they just picked me up, you know, from the street. Or the English department. In the black dress. In the black dress, which was not running. So then anyways, I'm just trying to use the same time because, yeah, we got the same time. Okay, so I started writing with them, and yes, indeed, it was all crap. And they had many kind ways of letting me know that that's what it was. But still, you know, I did go to Helicon West because that's the beauty of this. And this is where it becomes community that, I don't know what your experiences are, but you come here to Helicon West, there's no judgment. Everything is cream and sugar, like in my poem. And we clap for everybody, we love everybody, we take away something from everybody's reading. Right? Right?
Right.
Yeah? Okay, thank you. Maybe I'm feeling
Always.
Exactly. All right, so there's that community. And the other story that is the other half of my answer is that I know nothing about baseball. I know. I'm hanging my head in shame. And I am not Kevin Costner's huge fan, but I still love that quote from his movie, "If you build it, they will come." And we quote, you know. That's what we do. So Starr and Michael Sauder and whomever else, they built it, and we've been coming. And that's what it is. And that's where the community has somewhere to go because it's built up. Thank you so much again.
And I wanted to say, part of this whole community thing is people like Joseph Anderson with the Logan Library, where we've been holding Helicon West for the last quite a while, are what really make this work. I mean, you all do. But Joseph, will you stand up? Because we want to thank you for always being there. Truly amazed and touched because when we ran out of our last venue before the Logan Library, I went down and was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to beg for space. And they just opened their arms and said, we've been waiting for you to come to us and ask if we can have Helicon West here. So that's pretty darn wonderful. And by the way, Joseph and the Logan Library brought all of those great refreshments that are in the back. So would you please eat them?
You know, it's funny, I think I passed the mic on this a few times because really I've been thinking back, and I don't think we had anything like this. When I was first in an undergraduate program studying creative writing. And, you know, I got my degree in it, went on, and spent years not writing. In part, I think, because I didn't see a place to share writing, and sending things out for publication trying to get, things into the journal somewhere seemed so unattainable that it really wasn't until I found myself working in development in New Jersey, writing letters, trying to get people to donate money to the nonprofit that I work for, that I realized, I felt like the soul was being ripped out of me, that I didn't have any creative outlet. And I went to grad school, and suddenly in grad school, that was the first time I'd ever been asked to read my work publicly, and asked, forced? And I think that perhaps it's having been through the vacuum of that makes me appreciate that much more what open mics, what places like Helicon have to offer the community. And that is that first place that validates you as a writer and lets you share your creativity with the community around you and have that support. It's amazing and enormous.
Well, mine was here, so it was really neat. But I will add this. The effect of what Star and everybody started here goes so much farther than just Logan. When I graduated with my master's from Utah State, the only job I could get right away was teaching for Steven Seneger, which was a nightmare. But before long, Chelsea Linderman, who some of you might remember is Chelsea Sutton, she got a job teaching, or as the writing center director down at Dixie. And I was talking to her and she said, we're trying to start a creative writing program, we could use some more creative writers. And she suggested that I apply for the position, and I got it. The first thing we did when we met for lunch, my first day down there, we said, we need to start Helicon down here. And so we started what was called Storm the Mic, and it was a weekly open mic that went for about 5 years before it died. And from that, we created a really strong writing community that then one of our strongest writers, Marianne Hills-Harding, stand up, moved to Provo and started the first really successful creative writing open mic in Provo. And so this is just Star's influence spreading, down south and back up. And it's amazing the importance that it has for people. I think for people going to school for writing, it's important because it lets them practice what they're doing. But especially, I saw it down in southern Utah, there's so many people that don't have a way to find their voice. We had a lot of sometimes homeless people that would wander in, homeless teens that would wander in, Storm the Mic. We had a lot of people that had escaped polygamy, and they had never had a voice before. And all of a sudden, they were in this safe space in a city that isn't full of a lot of safe spaces where they could get up and say what they need to say and feel comfortable saying it and kind of try and find that voice.
So Rob, we saw your incredible memorization skills and also performance skills. And Darren, you also mentioned kind of this notion of page versus stage, not necessarily versus, but that kind of dichotomy that's there. Sure. Ooh, there we go. Hello.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why the four of you think it's important to hear writers read their work out loud. Why that's a crucial part of this community, of this process of becoming a writer. And also, was there a performance that you saw at some point in time that has stuck with you, and why?
We don't have to start, period.
You guys are going to be really sick of hearing from me. It is really important, and I actually have, I won't do it now, I'll put you through it, but if anybody wants to come talk to me afterwards, I have whole workshops on why it's important and on the history, kind of this cycle between oral poetry and written poetry throughout the history of the world. I think, in one, it's important for the audience because it's an entirely different level of interaction. In some ways, it loses something because you can't sit down for as long as you want with the poem. You get from the time it leaves the poet's mouth to the time it hits your ears, and that's it, and then it's gone. But at the same time, you pick up other things. You pick up their body language, you pick up their intonation, all those things. For the poet, I think it's even more important because you have to look at your work differently. Because you have to be aware that, if I have a really dense poem, right? I always heard poets say, oh, well, you can't do that one at a slam or, at a performance because it's just too dense, it's a page poem. And it's like, no, if it's dense, if you think it's a page poem, that just means you have to up your performance game. Because you have to make your audience be able to process that through your performance. And so I think it's important for people to look at their work that way, look at how it would be presented orally. There's something else I was going to say on that. Oh, the performance that inspired us. It was actually here at Utah State. We used to have something, it started out as Beat Poetry Night. Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
It was really awesome. And then one year we kind of expanded it and it became Beat Slam Uncensored, I think is what we called it. It was a mixture of beat poetry and slam poetry. And I had never heard of slam poetry before, and we brought in Anish Mosgani. If you've ever heard of him, look him up, it's fantastic. And I sat there and that was the first time like I had ever been truly like rocked by a reading. I'd been rocked by reading stuff, but every time I'd gone to a poetry reading, it was always kind of the same, like, da, 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 da. And this was the first time somebody performed their stuff, and it, you know, I had to go change my pants afterwards, so.
Okay, pants off. So yeah, well, actually, I totally agree. See, the Greeks didn't write down their poems 2,000 some years ago, right? They performed everything. They practiced, they memorized, and they delivered, and it became an art. And then we jump over here, and I absolutely agree with Darren that when I first started hearing slam poets, especially Anish Mosgani, it was just unimaginably good. He still is. And it just somehow broke something like a dam, you know, the little Dutch boy pulling out the finger from the dam type of thing that, you go out there and you just let it flow. You don't look for the ideas, the meter, for Pete's sake. Not one more time somebody tell me what iambic pentameter is and isn't. So no, it sounds like there are no rules. There are very strict rules to slam poetry, but it's the performance. And then you just go with it. And I started seeing it in my own poetry that I wasn't as tied to certain things. So yeah, it's out loud and it's fabulous. So yeah, bring it on, keep coming, read it, share it. And of course you hear your own poem, right? Your own words. And suddenly they sound different. They sound awesome. Don't listen to anybody who says otherwise.
I'll do the bragging part first, which is that I got to see George Saunders read Sea Oak right after he published Pastralia. And that story is still one of my all-time favorites, but I cannot read it on the page without hearing George reading the dialogue in my head. It just changed my relationship to that whole story. And I still love listening to stories out loud, whether it be at a live reading or on a podcast like New Yorker Fiction Podcast or something like that, where I can hear those stories. But I think the real benefit of getting to see writers read live, there's lots of benefits for us as writers hearing. It's seeing people's reaction, like where do they really connect with this? Do they connect with this? Have I completely failed in my job? But going to a reading and being able to ask authors questions, I think is amazing. And the page is never going to give you that. And so that's the other thing I really value about readings.
Okay, I've been to a few. Some of them were terrible, and that's just as instructional as anything else. I mean, Mike, he asked, first of all, why will I do it from memory? You're supposed to revere a poet, right? And you go and you see, and then they're disappointed because they spend the whole time with this stack of books and they're not prepared. And they're like, gee, what should I do next? And they can't find their way, and they're looking at their own table of contents. And I just thought, are you kidding me? Stop this. If anybody went to a play and that's what they were doing, we would all walk out before intermission. And so I decided I would never, ever be like those people. I don't care how big they were, their reading stunk because they didn't care, or they seemed not to care, right? And so if actors can do it, and I'm never going to say that actors are inherently better than me, I'll do it too, right? Now, as far as readings go that I've seen, there was one time, and it was pretty interesting. It was off Grafton Street, Dublin, Bewley's Cafe, Ireland, right? And this woman named Paula Meehan, who had been running the workshop, and I was in there as a grad student. And the reason I picked this school was because they had studied abroad in Ireland in the summer, and it was in my home state. So I didn't know her, or Evan Boland, or Leland Bardwell, but it was cool. And they were going to read at night, so now my teacher is doing her thing. And, it's this little coffee shop, and upstairs is this reading room, and she's about 5 feet tall. And, like pixie-sized. And her poems are very, very cool, but when she was reading, she had one foot the whole time in front of the other, and the book in her hand. And it was like she rocked herself somehow. The book is in her hand, but her eyes are closed, so either she can do that thing from Bull Durham where you read through your eyelids, right? Or she had it memorized anyway, and it was just there as a sort of, shield or reassurance, and she just kind of chanted and rocked them out, and I just thought, wow, that's pretty cool. It was very enchanting, incantatory, and it wasn't just on the pulse of the rhythm, it was just this whole sort of oceanic thing she did. That, I thought, was, at least as good as anything I ever watched, in terms of poetry readings, at least.
Susan, you mentioned the notion of the ivory tower at one point. I can't remember if it was during your reading or...
UVU.
Or, yes, thank you, Star. To repeat, Susan mentioned the idea of the ivory tower, and in other places it might be called the town and gown divide. There's a lot of different names for it. One of the things that has always impressed me about Helicon West is that it resisted that more than any other literary series I've seen in the state. It's done a better job of bridging that gap. And I'm curious, not necessarily this specific series, but what you think allows a series to do that, and why that's critically important for writers and for our writing community.
I'll start.
What's that?
Okay, I'll start this one. Bridging the academic and the community gap, I think one of the things that allows it to be so successful here is this combination of invited readers and community readers, and everybody being on an equal stage. And you don't find that in every place. And I remember when I first came up and read, just being completely enchanted by that. And I don't know what to say beyond that. I think that's just how democratic this reading series is astonishing and wonderful. And I don't know why it's not the norm, honestly.
I think the answer to that one is in Star. As lovely and loving and wonderful she is, you have 7 minutes and that's it. Well, I think that's one way to do. That's probably part of why it is successful, not just because, again, back to the build it and then they come that people count on it. They know every second, fourth Thursday. Helicon West, it's happening. Throughout the summer, grad students, they carry the torch. Then they come back for the regular semester year, and it just keeps going. Everybody comes. And it's as it is just part of life here, it's just stupendous. That I'm just actually shocked that there are no 500 people here, because I know that this program has touched that many people. So yeah, that democratic idea, I think that's probably a huge part of that. Yeah, so thank you again.
Like Susan said, I think it starts at the top, and here that's Star. So many new writers come, and they need to be shown by example. And if Star and the other people running Helicon had that kind of ivory tower, snootiness or whatever, that separation, then that's what would have filtered into it. I think another example is what we had down in Southern Utah, Storm the Mic. Not in so much a community and academic divide, but I think I said that Southern Utah is the most conservative portion of the state. But by nature, that also means we have some of the strongest opposition, some of the people that are like the most they feel oppressed and they lash out really strong. And so we tried to create a space leading by example that anything was welcome. And so we would have somebody get up and do something that was more conservative, more in touch with the majority of the state, and everybody would clap for them. Even the people that had had horrible experiences, say with the LDS Church, they would clap for that. And then that person would get up and do something about, F the church, F this, F that, and the person that had just got up and read their piece would clap for them. And it's important to have a space like that where every idea is welcome and every idea is open for dialogue, because now I run a partially online publication, and you don't get that there. I mean, you get trolls, it can be something that you disagree with slightly, and you de-evolve into the most vitriol form of communication in response to everything. And so I think it is important for these kind of dialogues, places to be open, kind of the salons.
I don't know. I get stumped a little bit by the question of what's the divide between, say, ivory tower. I've never been in one. None of the places I've ever worked or gone to school were considered ivory or important or special or elevated or rarefied. I mean, I can't kick open doors saying, yeah, well, I was a raging Cajun for my PhD. University of Louisiana, Lafayette, sucker. I can't do that, right? And I've never even known anybody who did act like that, because I've spent most of my time in the West, and I don't think Westerners pull that move. I mean, or maybe I'm not ever around rich enough people. But I like when there's spillover, and I'll tell you why. University students rarely show up for the things on campus, and unless community comes too, the audience is awfully small. At least that's been my experience. So thank you. I don't know, maybe you're all university students, but I think some of you aren't, and thanks for everybody mixing like that, because it makes it feel like the West,
I think we're going to turn it over to the audience now. Do you want them to come up to the mic to ask questions? Sure.